A mob boss weeps at his wife's grave, unaware that she's alive and watching him. Let me know what you thought of this story by rating it from 0 to 10 in the comments, and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know if you enjoyed my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The city of New York awoke under a grey blanket that Thursday in September, with the fine mist typical of the season dampening the sidewalks of Park Avenue. Among the mirrored skyscrapers reflecting the cloudy sky, Liam O'Connell watched the city's movement through the panoramic window of his 42nd floor office. At 42, he was one of the most powerful men in the country, commanding an empire that spanned luxury construction firms, real estate developers, and an intricate network of businesses that few dared to question. His name was spoken with reverence in the corridors of corporate power, but also whispered with fear by those who knew the true nature of his activities. Liam checked the Swiss gold watch on his wrist. 3 in the afternoon. It was time to go. His secretary, an efficient woman who had learned not to ask questions, had already cancelled all his afternoon appointments, as she had every day for the past 3 years. He took his Italian jacket from the back of the leather chair, adjusted his dark tie, and left without a word, ignoring the curious glances of employees who knew that every afternoon the boss disappeared for a few hours without explanation. The driver was already waiting in the private garage with the black Mercedes, but Liam dismissed him with a wave of his hand. He preferred to drive there alone. Those minutes in the chaotic New York traffic were the only moments when his mind could prepare for what was to come. 30 minutes later, he parked in front of the gates of Woodlawn Cemetery, a silent place where death coexisted with the ostentation of the city's wealth. Liam walked down the corridor of marble mausoleums with the familiarity of someone who knows every stone, every tree, every curve of the path. In his hands, a bouquet of fresh, fragrant red roses, the most beautiful money could buy. He always brought red roses because they were her favorite flowers, because she said they symbolized the love they had shared since they were teenagers, a love that had survived poverty, hardship, and the uncertainties of the beginning. When he arrived before the black marble tomb with golden letters, Liam felt the familiar weight tighten his chest. Chloe Sullivan O'Connell, the inscription read. Beloved wife, born under the March sun, taken too soon by a cruel fate. Her photo, embedded in the cold stone, showed a woman in her early 30s with luminous brown eyes and a smile that lit up any room. Wavy black hair fell over her delicate shoulders, and in that portrait, she wore the blue dress Liam had bought for her 30th birthday. He knelt before the headstone, placed the roses in the bronze vase, and, as always, began to speak. He told her about his day, about the deals she would have found interesting, about the decisions he needed to make. He talked about how he missed her with every breath, with every heartbeat. His calloused hands, hands that had built an empire by laying bricks in his youth and later commanding dangerous men, now caressed the marble as if he could feel her soft skin through the stone. The tears began to fall, as they did every day. Liam O'Connell, the man who faced criminals without blinking, who negotiated millions without trembling, who commanded an army of employees and enforcers with an iron fist, cried like a lost boy before the grave of the woman he loved. His broad shoulders shook with sobs that came from the depths of his soul, and he didn't care if anyone saw. There, in that sacred space, he could just be a man broken by grief. What Liam didn't know, what he could never imagine, was that a few yards away, hidden behind a century-old cypress tree whose branches formed a natural curtain, Chloe was alive and watching every tear he shed. She wore simple clothes, faded jeans and a nondescript grey blouse, a cap hiding part of her face. Her 35 years now bore marks that didn't exist before, a thinness that came from sleepless nights in abandoned shelters and scarce meals, but her eyes held a strength she herself didn't recognize. Chloe wrung her hands, fighting the devastating impulse to run to him, to reveal herself, to end this suffering that consumed her as much as it consumed Liam. But she knew she couldn't, not yet. 3 years ago she had made a desperate choice, and now she had to live with the consequences until she could ensure the safety of them both. Their story had begun 25 years earlier, when Liam was just a skinny 17-year-old from the Bronx, working as a mason's assistant during the day and studying at night in a rundown public school. Chloe was 14 and sold candy at the entrance of that same school to help her mother, who worked as a maid. They met on a rainy afternoon when Liam bought a chocolate bar he didn't have the money for, promising to bring the change the next day. He returned the next day, not to bring the change, but to buy another piece of candy and talk for a few more minutes with that brown-eyed girl who made him forget his hunger and fatigue. In the following months, those few minutes at the school gate turned into longer dates on Saturdays in the park, into shared dreams of a different future, into whispered promises that one day they would escape that life of hardship. Liam promised her that he would work until his hands bled, that he would study until his eyes burned, that he would do whatever it took to give her a better life. Chloe believed him because she saw in the poor boy's eyes the same fierce determination she felt in her own heart. She took care of her 3 younger siblings while her mother worked in other people's homes, woke up before sunrise to make breakfast, took the little ones to school, and only then went to sell her candies. But when she was with Liam, it all seemed bearable, because they had each other. They married when she was 19 and he was 22. It was a simple ceremony in a modest church in their neighborhood, with friends from the block as witnesses, and the reception held on the rooftop of Chloe's mother's building. That day, Liam swore before God and man that he would protect her, that he would love her, that he would build for her the world she deserved. And Chloe, in her simple white dress bought from a thrift store, swore to be by his side under any circumstance, in wealth or poverty, in joy or sadness. The first years were difficult, but full of a pure happiness that money could never buy. They lived in a tiny one-room apartment in a rough part of the city, shared a thin mattress on the floor, and had more dreams than furniture. Liam worked 14 hours a day, first as a bricklayer, then getting better jobs as a foreman, always studying at night, taking technical courses, learning everything he could about construction and management. It was during these years that Liam met the people who would change his trajectory, for better and for worse. On a construction site in the south of the city, he impressed a contractor named Arthur O'Connell with his skill, his vision, and his hunger to succeed. Arthur was a powerful man, owner of several construction companies and with connections that reached the highest echelons of power. He saw in Liam not just a competent employee, but someone who could become part of the family. Arthur had 2 sons, Marcus and Edward, arrogant men who had been born with a silver spoon in their mouths and wasted the opportunities their father gave them. When Arthur realized that Liam had more talent and determination than his own sons, he made an unexpected proposal. He would legally adopt Liam, giving him the O'Connell surname and a stake in the family business. Chloe was suspicious from the start. She had heard stories about Arthur O'Connell, whispers that his dealings were not always legal, that he was involved with corrupt politicians and unscrupulous businessmen. But Liam was dazzled by the opportunity to finally lift his wife out of poverty, to give her the life he had always promised. He accepted the proposal, was legally adopted at 27, and overnight went from a poor bricklayer to the heir of an empire. The following years were a meteoric rise. Liam proved to be a business genius, multiplying the profits of Arthur's companies, closing deals that seemed impossible, expanding the empire into new sectors. The one-room apartment was exchanged for a mansion on the Upper East Side, crowded buses for luxury cars, simple clothes for Italian suits. Chloe received jewelry, international trips, a life of luxury she had never imagined possible. But with the money came secrets. Chloe began to notice that not all of the family's assets had licit origins. There were meetings she was not allowed to attend, phone calls Liam took locked in his office, documents he hid from her. When she questioned him, he reassured her, saying they were just normal precautions in the business world, that she didn't need to worry about these things, that her role was just to enjoy the life he was building for her. For 15 years, Chloe chose to believe him. After all, Liam was the boy she had met at the school gate, the man who had promised to love her forever, the one who still looked at her with the same devotion as when they were poor teenagers, dreaming of a better future. They lived an intense passion that time and money could not diminish. Liam still brought her flowers for no reason, still kissed her as if it were the first time, still whispered words of love that made her melt. But everything fell apart one September morning, 3 years ago. Chloe was in the walk-in closet when she heard Liam's phone vibrate insistently on the dresser. He was in the shower and couldn't answer. On impulse, she picked up the device to silence it and saw messages in a family WhatsApp group she wasn't a part of. What she read in those messages froze her blood. Marcus, Liam's adoptive brother, had written, "We need to solve the Chloe problem soon. The wedding with Isabella can't wait any longer." Their father replied, "I know, son. I'm already arranging everything. It will look natural, an accident or something. Liam will suffer at first, but he's strong and will understand it was necessary." And Edward added, "Isabella is already waiting. Her father has guaranteed full protection for all our businesses after she marries Liam. This is the only way out." Chloe felt the floor disappear from under her feet. She reread the messages several times, trying to find another interpretation. But there was no doubt. The O'Connell family was planning to kill her so that Liam could marry Isabella Croft, the daughter of an influential politician who would offer legal protection to the family's dirty businesses. She was just an obstacle, a woman of humble origins who added no value to the connections they needed to survive in a world of corruption and crime. With trembling hands, she continued to read previous messages and discovered horrible details. They had already tried to make it look like a robbery months ago, but she hadn't left the house that day. They had considered poisoning her food, but the family doctor warned it could raise suspicions. Now they were planning something that would look like a car accident or a sudden health problem. What devastated Chloe the most was not finding a single message from Liam defending her or questioning the plan. He simply didn't participate in the conversations, but he didn't report them either. Did he know and agree? Was the man she had loved for 25 years capable of allowing her murder for financial convenience? At that moment, with a broken heart and terror taking over every cell of her body, Chloe made the most desperate decision of her life. She couldn't confront Liam because if he was involved, she would be signing her own death warrant. She couldn't go to the police because the O'Connell family had powerful connections that would render her word useless. Her only chance of survival was to disappear in a way that no one would look for her. She had to die. Chloe called her cousin Clara, the only person she still trusted completely. Clara worked as a nurse in a private hospital and had seen many things over the years. Things that taught her the world wasn't as black and white as people like to believe. When Chloe told her about the messages and the danger she was in, Clara didn't hesitate. Over the next 48 hours, the two women devised a risky and desperate plan. Clara had access to drugs that could induce a state similar to death, slowing vital functions to almost imperceptible levels. She knew an indebted doctor who, for a generous payment, would forge reports attesting to death by cerebral aneurysm, and she had a contact in the morgue who, for an even larger sum, would swap Chloe's body with another at the time of burial. Chloe discreetly emptied her personal bank accounts, gathering all the money she had without raising suspicion. It wasn't much compared to Liam's fortune, but it would be enough to pay the necessary bribes and survive for a few months. She wrote farewell letters to Liam, to her mother, to her siblings, telling them how much she loved them and asking them to be happy. She kept these letters in an envelope that she gave to Clara with instructions to only be opened if something went wrong with the plan. On the designated morning, Chloe took the drugs Clara had given her. Liam had left early for a meeting, and she was alone in the mansion. In 15 minutes, she began to feel dizzy, her legs weakened, and she collapsed on the bedroom floor. Clara, who was waiting hidden in the back of the property, heard the prearranged sound and entered through the back door. She found Chloe unconscious, but still breathing faintly, exactly as planned. Clara called 911, and when the paramedics arrived, she was already playing the role of the desperate cousin who had found Chloe passed out. At the hospital, the bribed doctor examined the patient, performed all the necessary tests to keep up appearances, and after 2 hours, officially declared that Chloe Sullivan O'Connell had died from a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Natural causes, unpredictable, a tragedy that could happen to anyone. When Liam received the call, he was in a meeting with foreign investors. The secretary entered the room with a pale face and whispered something in his ear. Liam stood up so abruptly that he knocked over his chair, muttered an incoherent excuse, and ran out. He drove to the hospital like a madman, running red lights, honking desperately, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, and tears already streaming down his face before he even had confirmation. At the hospital, Clara received him with red eyes from crying, genuine this time because she knew the pain she was causing. She led him to the room where Chloe's body was covered by a white sheet. When Liam pulled back the sheet and saw the pale face of the woman he loved, something inside him died along with her. He hugged the cold body, screamed her name repeatedly, begged her to wake up, promised anything if the heavens would give him back his wife. The hospital security had to drag him out when it was time to take the body to the morgue. Liam fought like a wild animal, punched walls until his hands bled, shouted that they couldn't take her, that she wasn't really dead, that there was some mistake. They had to sedate him to stop him from hurting himself. What Clara didn't tell Chloe, what she discovered too late to change the plan, was that Liam was not part of the family conspiracy. In the days following Chloe's death, Clara observed Liam's genuine despair and understood that he would never have agreed to any plan against his wife. The messages Chloe had read were a plot by Arthur, Marcus, and Edward, kept secret from Liam precisely because they knew he would never allow it. Arthur and his sons, seeing Liam's devastating reaction, realized the monstrous mistake they had made. They didn't need to kill Chloe because Liam would never have agreed to marry Isabella Croft while his wife was alive. Now, with Chloe actually dead, Liam was so shattered he could barely work, let alone think about a new marriage. But it was too late to go back. Revealing the truth now would be to admit an attempted murder they hadn't carried out, but which Chloe had believed real enough to fake her own death. It would completely destroy Liam, who was already on the verge of suicide. So, they decided to keep the secret and deal with the consequences. The funeral was a manifestation of grief that moved even the hardest of hearts. Liam attended in a crumpled black suit, his eyes red and swollen, unable to utter a word. He stood by the coffin throughout the wake, holding Chloe's cold hand, refusing to let her go. When it was time to close the coffin, he had to be restrained by 6 men to keep from jumping in with her. At the cemetery, as the coffin was lowered into the ground, Liam tried to throw himself into the grave. His adoptive brothers held him back, and he fought with the strength of desperation, screaming that he couldn't leave her alone there, that she was afraid of the dark, that he had promised never to abandon her. When they finally managed to pull him away, he collapsed on the ground and stayed there, sobbing like a child as the rain began to fall. In the following days, Liam tried to kill himself 3 times. First with an overdose of sedatives that the doctors managed to reverse. Then by trying to jump from his office window, but security guards stopped him. The 3rd time, he locked himself in the garage with the car running, but Arthur found out in time and broke down the door. After that, they placed Liam under constant surveillance, with nurses and psychiatrists trying to prevent him from carrying out what he saw as the only way out of his pain. Meanwhile, Chloe woke up in a safe house that Clara had rented on the outskirts of New York. She woke up with her body aching from the effects of the drugs, her head throbbing, and confused about where she was and what had happened. When Clara explained that the plan had worked, that she was officially dead and buried, Chloe felt a mixture of relief and horror. The relief was short-lived. Clara, with tears in her eyes, told her about Liam's reaction, about the suicide attempts, about the state of total despair he was in. It was then that Chloe understood the magnitude of her mistake. Liam was not involved in the plan to kill her. The man she loved was innocent, and she had just destroyed his life in the worst possible way. Chloe wanted to run to him immediately, reveal the truth, end his suffering, but Clara stopped her, explaining that the situation was now even more complicated. If she revealed herself to be alive, she would have to explain why she faked her own death, present the evidence of the conspiracy, and that would probably destroy the O'Connell family. Liam would be caught between the woman he loved and the family that had taken him in, and there was no guarantee he would choose Chloe after everything that had happened. Furthermore, Clara warned that Arthur and his sons, once exposed, could become even more dangerous. They had resources, connections, and no scruples. If they knew Chloe was alive and posed a threat, they might really kill her this time, and Clara too for complicity. So Chloe made another painful decision. She would remain dead, but she wouldn't stay idle. She would use the time to investigate the O'Connell family deeply, gather solid evidence of all the crimes they had committed, build a case so strong that when she finally revealed herself, they would have no way to defend themselves or retaliate, and only then, when she could guarantee everyone's safety, would she return to Liam. The months turned into years. Chloe cut and dyed her hair, lost weight, completely changed her appearance. She obtained fake documents through the same contacts Clara had used for the original plan. She started working as a night cleaner in commercial buildings in downtown New York, an invisible service that no one notices or questions. During the day, she slept in homeless shelters or in small rooms rented in cheap boarding houses. At night, while cleaning empty offices, she had access to computers, documents, and privileged information. Chloe, who was once just the protected wife of a powerful man, became a determined investigator. She discovered that the O'Connell family was involved in a massive money laundering scheme through overbilled construction projects, that they had ties to organized crime, facilitating the construction of clandestine casinos, that they bribed politicians and judges to win fraudulent bids. Every piece of information was meticulously documented, photographed, and stored on flash drives hidden in different places. But the most painful discovery was what they were doing to Liam. Taking advantage of his emotional vulnerability, Arthur and his sons began to gradually transfer all of Liam's personal assets to shell companies they controlled, documents he signed without reading in his moments of despair, powers of attorney presented to him as simple administrative formalities, all part of a meticulous plan to steal everything he had earned. Isabella Croft was reintroduced into Liam's life 6 months after Chloe's death. Beautiful, sophisticated, the daughter of a powerful senator, she was introduced as a family friend who had come to offer condolences. Arthur and his sons constantly pushed her towards Liam, organizing dinners where she was present, suggesting he needed female companionship to overcome his loss. But Liam systematically rejected her. He was polite, but cold. He thanked her for her presence, but never accepted invitations for dinners alone. He made it clear that his heart belonged to Chloe, even if she was dead, and that there would never be another woman in his life. This constant refusal frustrated Arthur's plans, but he didn't give up, believing that with time and persistence, Liam would eventually yield. Meanwhile, every afternoon without fail, Liam visited Chloe's grave. He talked to her as if she were alive, telling her about his day, asking for advice, begging her to give him strength to continue. He wept copiously, without shame or embarrassment. That daily hour at the cemetery was the only thing that kept him minimally functional. And Chloe watched it all, hidden with a broken heart. She saw how he had lost weight, how his eyes had lost their shine, how he had become a ghost of himself. The man who commanded meetings with an iron fist now could barely concentrate on work matters. She watched him slowly wither, dying a little each day, and felt that she was killing him with her own supposed death. There were moments when Chloe almost revealed her presence, days when Liam seemed so desperate that she feared he might actually succeed in killing himself, but she always held back, reminding herself that revealing the truth without the necessary proof could put them in even greater danger. She needed to be strong. She needed to hold on just a little longer until she had everything she needed to destroy those who tried to destroy her. Chloe's transformation during these 3 years was profound. The delicate woman who depended on Liam for everything truly died that September morning. The one who rose from the ashes was a warrior forged by the need to survive alone in a hostile world. She learned to defend herself, taking self-defense classes in gyms, in poor neighborhoods where no one would recognize her. She learned about technology, hacking systems to access protected information. She learned to live in the shadows, invisible and untouchable. But no matter how strong she became, no matter how determined she was, nothing prepared her for the pain of seeing the man she loved suffer in that way. Every tear he shed was like a stab to her heart. Every word of love he whispered to her photo was torture. She constantly wondered if she had made the right choice, if it wouldn't have been better to face the danger and trust Liam from the beginning. 3 years passed like this, in a kind of purgatory where both suffered separately, trapped in a web of lies and secrets that seemed to have no end. Chloe continued to gather evidence, waiting for the right moment. Liam continued to visit the grave, hoping the pain would eventually kill him. And the O'Connell family continued their schemes, believing they had escaped the consequences of their plans. Until that rainy Thursday arrived 3 years later, that would change everything. Liam arrived at the cemetery earlier than usual, visibly upset in a way Chloe hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't the melancholic sadness he usually showed, but a contained fury, an anger that made his fists clench and his jaw tremble. He knelt before the grave and, for the first time in 3 years, he didn't cry softly. He exploded. He yelled at Chloe's photo, punched the marble ground until his hands bled, letting out all the anger he had been accumulating. "You left me alone with them, Chloe," he shouted, his voice hoarse with pain. "You left me alone with this family of snakes who only want to use me. They want me to sign papers that will leave me with nothing, that will hand everything we built over to them. And I don't know what to do, because you were always the one who guided me, who always knew what was right." He continued, venting years of accumulated frustration. He talked about how he had discovered that day that Arthur and his sons were pressuring him to sign a general power of attorney that would give them full control over all his assets. About how he had finally realized that the family that had welcomed him never saw him as a son, only as a tool. About how he was tired of pretending to be alive when he had died with her that September morning. "Give me strength, love," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "Give me the strength to face them alone. Tell me what to do. Because without you, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I can go on like this. It was at that moment, hearing the genuine despair in his voice, seeing the strength he was trying to muster despite all the pain, that Chloe made the bravest decision of her life. The consequences no longer mattered. It didn't matter if she had all the proof she needed. The danger didn't matter. She couldn't let him suffer for another day. She couldn't let him face those monsters alone when she could be by his side. Chloe stepped out from behind the cypress tree where she was hiding and began to walk slowly towards him. Her steps were hesitant. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it would explode. She didn't know how he would react, if he would believe she was real, if he would forgive her for everything she had done. Liam was on his knees, his head bowed, still clutching Chloe's photo to his chest. He didn't notice her approach until a shadow blocked the grey afternoon light. He slowly looked up, still expecting to see a stranger, a cemetery worker perhaps. When he saw her face, thin and pale, but unmistakably hers, her brown eyes filled with tears, her hair different, but her lips still the same ones he had kissed thousands of times, Liam froze completely. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. It was a hallucination. It had to be. He had finally gone completely insane. His mind creating an image of her so real, it seemed he could touch it. "Liam," Chloe whispered, her voice hoarse from 3 years of silence towards him, choked with an emotion she couldn't control. "It's me. I'm alive. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Her voice, that voice he had only heard in dreams for 3 endless years, broke the paralysis. Liam tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't respond. He tried to speak, but no sound came from his throat. His eyes widened, his breathing became erratic, and then everything went black. He fainted from emotion, falling sideways onto the wet cemetery ground. Chloe ran to him, kneeling and holding his face in her hands. He was still breathing, his heart still beating too fast, but he was unconscious. She cried over him, kissing his face, repeatedly asking for forgiveness, promising she would explain everything, that everything would be okay now that they were together again. When Liam woke up a few minutes later, still lying on the ground with his head in Chloe's lap, he looked at her with a mixture of hope and terror. He needed to confirm that she was real, that he wasn't dreaming or delirious. He raised a trembling hand and touched her face, feeling the warm, real skin beneath his fingers. "You're alive," he murmured, still unable to fully believe it. "How? Why? I buried you. I cried for you for 3 years. How can you be alive?" Chloe helped him sit up, and right there on the cold cemetery floor, under the fine rain that was starting to fall, she told him everything. She told him about the messages she had found, about the family's plan to kill her, about the desperate decision to fake her own death. She told him about discovering too late that he was innocent, about watching his suffering without being able to reveal herself, about the 3 years gathering evidence against those who had tried to destroy her. Liam listened to everything in silence, his face going through a cascade of emotions. Shock, anger, pain, understanding, and finally a fury so intense that Chloe felt afraid. But it wasn't anger at her. It was anger at the family that had caused all this. Anger at Arthur, Marcus, and Edward, who had planned to kill an innocent woman for greed. Anger at himself for not realizing who they really were. When Chloe finished telling him everything, showing him the evidence she had collected on flash drives she always kept with her, Liam pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, feeling her warmth, confirming to himself that she was real, that he wasn't dreaming, that his Chloe was alive and in his arms. They stayed like that for long minutes, embracing under the rain that now fell harder, not caring about anything but the fact that they were together again. 3 years of pain, of longing, of suffering, all pouring into that embrace that seemed to want to make up for every second they were apart. When they finally separated, Liam held Chloe's face between his hands and looked deep into her eyes. "You have no idea what I went through," he said, his voice breaking. "You have no idea how many times I wanted to die just to be with you again. But at the same time, I understand why you did what you did, and I will make them all pay for what they tried to do to you." Chloe shook her head. "Not alone. This time we fight together. I'm not that fragile woman you needed to protect anymore. These 3 years have transformed me into someone who can fight by your side, not behind you." Liam looked at her with renewed admiration. He saw in her eyes a strength that wasn't there before, a fierce determination that rivaled his own. The woman he had loved was sweet and delicate. The woman standing before him now was a warrior, and he fell in love with her all over again, in an even deeper way. They spent hours in that cemetery, planning their next move. Chloe showed him all the evidence she had collected. Documents proving money laundering, recordings of incriminating conversations, proof of bribes to officials, fraudulent asset transfers. It was enough to completely destroy the O'Connell empire and put Arthur and his sons in prison for decades. But they needed to be careful. The O'Connell family had powerful connections and unlimited resources. If they realized Chloe was alive and posed a threat, they wouldn't hesitate to use violence. They needed a plan that would protect them while exposing all the crimes. Liam had an ally the family didn't know about, an honest federal prosecutor he had befriended years ago, before discovering the true nature of the O'Connell businesses. This prosecutor, Robert Costa, had been investigating the family for years, but had never been able to get enough evidence. With what Chloe had collected, plus Liam's testimony from inside the organization, they could build a solid case. The plan began to take shape. Liam would go home and act normally as if nothing had changed. Chloe would remain hidden, but now with his protection. They would work discreetly with Prosecutor Costa to prepare an operation that would arrest everyone involved simultaneously, leaving no time for counterattacks or escapes. But before they parted that day, they needed to seal their reunion definitively. Right there, under the rain, next to the empty tomb that symbolized Chloe's fake death, Liam kissed her. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, filled with 3 years of longing and repressed desire. Chloe responded with equal intensity, their bodies joining as if trying to merge into one. When they separated, they both knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but they also knew they would face it together, stronger than ever, united by a love that had proven to be greater than betrayal, lies, and even death. Liam took Chloe to a safe apartment he owned under a false name, a place he kept for emergencies that no one in the family knew about. It was small and simple compared to the mansion where they had lived, but for them, it was perfect. They could finally be together without fear, without lies, without needing to hide. That first night together, after 3 years, they didn't sleep. They stayed up talking, catching up, rediscovering each other. Liam told her about the hell these years had been, about how the pain of loss had corroded his soul, about the times he almost gave up on life. Chloe spoke of the loneliness of being dead while alive, of the cold nights in shelters, of the strength she had to find within herself not to give up. But they also talked about the future, about what it would be like when it was all over, when they could live freely again. Liam promised that when this was finished, he would leave the world of dirty business behind and rebuild his life honestly. Chloe promised she would never keep secrets from him again, that they would face any problem together. In the following days, Liam returned to the mansion and continued his normal routine, but now with a renewed purpose. He watched Arthur and his sons with different eyes, clearly seeing the hypocrisy and greed that had always been there, but that he had refused to see. When they pressured him to sign the general power of attorney, he pretended to consider it, buying time while Robert Costa prepared the operation. Meanwhile, Chloe began to work directly with the prosecutor, handing over all the evidence she had collected and giving her detailed testimony about everything she had discovered. Costa was impressed with the quantity and quality of the evidence. With that, plus Liam's cooperation, they could not only arrest the O'Connell family, but also dismantle an entire network of corruption that extended to various sectors of government and private enterprise. The plan was working perfectly until something unexpected happened. Clara, Chloe's cousin, who had helped her fake her death, disappeared. She wasn't answering her phone, didn't show up for work at the hospital, and when Chloe went to her apartment, she found signs of a struggle and blood on the floor. The message was clear. The O'Connell family had discovered something and had kidnapped Clara as a form of pressure. Hours later, Liam received a video on his phone. It showed Clara tied to a chair, her face bruised, clearly terrified. Marcus's voice narrated, "We know you're hiding something, Liam. We know you've been talking to people you shouldn't be. Bring whatever you're planning to us, or the nurse pays the price." Chloe panicked. Clara was the only family she had left, the only person who had helped her when she needed it most. She couldn't let her die. She wanted to turn herself in, trade her life for Clara's, do anything to save her. But Liam held her tight. "This is exactly what they're expecting," he explained. "They want you to reveal yourself, to come out of hiding. The moment you do, they'll kill you both. Our only chance is to speed up the operation and arrest all of them before they hurt Clara." Costa agreed. They didn't have all the arrest warrants ready yet, but with the evidence of the kidnapping, they could act immediately. The FBI prepared a rescue operation for that same night, using the trackers Liam had secretly planted on the family's cars and cell phones. The operation was intense and dangerous. The O'Connell family was holding Clara in an abandoned warehouse on the east side of New York, the same place where they used to solve their dirtiest problems. When the FBI raided the location, there was a shootout. Marcus tried to use Clara as a human shield, but elite snipers managed to neutralize him without harming her. Arthur and Edward were arrested in their homes simultaneously, with no chance to destroy evidence or escape. Isabella Croft, upon discovering that Liam would never marry her and that the entire operation had been uncovered, tried to use her father's connections to escape, but Senator Croft himself, realizing he would be dragged into the scandal, handed her over to the authorities to try to save his own skin. When Chloe was reunited with Clara at the hospital where she was being examined, the two embraced and cried with relief. Clara apologized for helping Chloe fake her death without better investigating whether Liam was truly involved in the conspiracy. Chloe forgave her immediately, knowing that everything Clara did was out of love and protection. The public exposure of all the O'Connell family's crimes was devastating. Newspapers ran headlines about the corruption scheme, the politicians involved, the bribed judges. Liam gave interviews telling his story, explaining how he was manipulated and deceived by the family that had adopted him. Society was divided between those who saw him as a victim and those who believed he was an accomplice. But Liam didn't care about public opinion. He had gotten his wife back, saved Clara, and freed himself from the chains that bound him to a dark past. The O'Connell empire completely collapsed. All the companies were investigated, the illegal assets seized, the criminal operations dismantled. Liam cooperated fully with the authorities, handing over everything he knew, accepting responsibility for his own mistakes. Because he had been manipulated and had cooperated extensively, he received only community service and fines. But more importantly, he regained his integrity. Chloe had to give her public testimony, explaining why she had faked her death and how she had survived for 3 years. Her story moved millions of people, especially women who found themselves in similar situations of violence and threat. She unintentionally became a symbol of resistance and overcoming adversity. 6 months after the whole truth came out, on a sunny spring morning, Liam and Chloe returned to Woodlawn Cemetery. But this time, not to cry before an empty tomb. this time to renew their wedding vows, to be reborn together from the ashes of everything they had lost. The ceremony was simple and intimate, with only Clara, Prosecutor Costa, and a few true friends who had stood by them through the entire ordeal. The priest, who had married them 25 years ago in a modest neighborhood church, conducted the ceremony, completing the circle that had begun when they were just two poor teenagers dreaming of a better future. Liam held Chloe's hands, looking deep into her brown eyes that now carried the wisdom of someone who had survived the impossible. 25 years ago, I promised to love and protect you, he said, his voice firm but emotional. I failed in many ways. I left you alone when you needed me most. I got involved in businesses that put us in danger. I didn't see the snakes living around me. But today, before God and these witnesses, I promise again. Only this time, I promise to love you as an equal, not as someone who needs protection. I promise to walk beside you, not in front of you. I promise absolute honesty, with no secrets that can separate us again. Chloe felt tears stream down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not pain. 25 years ago, I was a girl who believed in fairy tales, she replied. I thought love meant being protected, cared for, kept safe. These 3 years have taught me that true love is about trust, about facing storms together, about being strong enough to let the other be strong too. I promise never to leave you in the dark again, never to make decisions that affect our life without consulting you. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your warrior by your side in the battles yet to come. When they kissed, sealing those new vows, it was no longer the kiss of two innocent youths dreaming of the future. It was the kiss of two survivors who had faced the worst life could offer and emerged stronger, wiser, more united. In the following months, Liam and Chloe sold the mansion on the Upper East Side, which carried too many memories of a life they no longer wanted. They bought a smaller but comfortable house in a quiet New York neighborhood, far from the glamour and dangers of the corporate world that had almost destroyed them. Liam used the money left after all the legal settlements to create an honest consulting firm, helping small entrepreneurs build legitimate businesses. It was gratifying to use his talent to help people like he and Chloe had once been. Young people full of dreams, but without resources or guidance. Chloe channeled her painful experience into something positive. She created a non-governmental organization dedicated to helping women in situations of domestic violence, offering safe shelter, legal assistance, and psychological support. She knew better than anyone what it was like to be alone, scared, not knowing who to turn to. She wanted other women to have the options she didn't have, to know there were people willing to help. Clara became Chloe's right-hand woman at the NGO, using her experience as a nurse to provide medical care to the women who arrived bruised and traumatized. The two cousins, who were already close, became even more united through this meaningful work. The transformation of both was deep and permanent. Liam learned that true power doesn't come from controlling people or accumulating wealth through questionable means, but from integrity, from making a positive difference in the lives of others, from building something he could look at with pride. He discovered that he could be strong without being ruthless. He could be successful without compromising his values. Chloe evolved from a woman who lived in her husband's shadow, dependent on him for everything, to an independent leader who inspired other women to find their own strength. She learned that vulnerability is not weakness, that asking for help is not defeat, but that having the courage to stand alone when necessary is the greatest demonstration of strength. Together, they created a completely new relationship, based not on the romantic illusions of youth, but on the mature reality of two adults who know each other's flaws and choose to love each other anyway. There were no more pedestals or rigid roles. There was true partnership, with each bringing their unique strengths to complement the other. A year after renewing their vows, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Chloe discovered she was pregnant. It was a sweet surprise for both of them, who had never been able to have children during their 15 years of marriage before the separation. The doctors had never found a clear reason, and they had eventually accepted that perhaps it wasn't their destiny to be parents. When Chloe showed Liam the positive test, he hugged her with a tenderness she hadn't seen in years. He cried, but they were tears of pure joy. After so much suffering, so much lost time, so much darkness, finally a light so bright it seemed to illuminate everything around them. The pregnancy was closely monitored due to Chloe's age and the years of stress her body had endured. But she was strong, stronger than ever, and the pregnancy proceeded without major problems. Liam accompanied her to every appointment, read books about fatherhood, prepared the baby's room with his own hands. A girl was born, healthy and perfect. With her mother's brown eyes and her father's black hair, they named her Hope because that's exactly what she represented. The hope for a better future, for a new beginning, for everything they had achieved together by overcoming the impossible. On the day they brought Hope home from the hospital, Liam stopped the car in front of Woodlawn Cemetery. Chloe looked at him, not understanding, but he just smiled and asked her to wait a moment. He got out of the car, carrying the baby in his arms, and walked to the black marble tomb that once bore her name. There, holding his daughter, Liam spoke to the empty tomb for the last time. "I came here for 3 years crying for the woman I loved," he said in a low voice. "I thought I had lost everything that mattered in life. But today I realize that those 3 years weren't just about loss. They were about transformation. The Chloe I loved needed to die so that the Chloe I love now could be born. And I also needed to die in a way, to leave behind the man I was becoming, to be reborn as someone worthy of her and this child." He looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in his arms. "Hope will grow up knowing her parents' story," he continued. "She will know about the mistakes we made, the difficulties we faced, how we almost lost everything. But she will also know about true love, about second chances, about how it's possible to rise even from the greatest falls. And I hope this makes her strong, wise, and able to make better choices than we did." When he returned to the car, Chloe saw a peace in Liam's eyes that wasn't there before. It was as if he had finally made peace with all the suffering, had found meaning in the pain, had transformed the tears of blood he had cried for 3 years into something beautiful and redemptive. The years that followed were of constant construction. Liam's company grew organically and honestly, never becoming an empire like the one he had commanded before, but being something much more valuable, a business he was genuinely proud of. Chloe's NGO helped hundreds of women escape situations of violence, rebuild their lives, and discover their own strength. Hope grew up in a house full of love, but also of honesty. When she was old enough to understand, Liam and Chloe told her the whole story, without omitting the ugly or embarrassing details. They told her about the conspiracy, the fake death, the 3 years of separation. They wanted her to learn from their mistakes, to know that even good people make terrible flaws, but that there is always a possibility of redemption. The girl grew up strong and determined, with her father's determination and her mother's resilience. She decided to pursue a career in law, specializing in defending victims of domestic violence, continuing in a different way the work her mother had begun. Liam and Chloe grew old together, their graying temples and wrinkles around their eyes testifying to the years of shared life. But unlike many couples who settle into a routine or separate under the weight of time, they remained in love. Perhaps even more in love than at the beginning, because now their love was founded not on romantic illusions, but on a deep knowledge of each other. They knew exactly who the other was at their best and worst moments. They had seen each other in absolute despair, in fury, in weakness. There were no masks or pretensions between them, and yet, or perhaps precisely because of it, they chose each other every day. On quiet evenings, sitting on their porch, watching the sunset over New York, they sometimes talked about those 3 terrible years of separation. Chloe still felt guilty for having caused Liam so much suffering, even understanding that she had done what she believed necessary to survive. Liam still felt angry at himself for not having noticed the rot within the family that had taken him in. But they both agreed that, as painful as it had been, that experience had transformed them in essential ways. Liam had become more humble, more empathetic, more aware that financial success did not mean success in life. Chloe had discovered an inner strength she never knew she possessed, an independence that completed her in ways dependency never could. When Hope married at 28 to a lawyer equally dedicated to social justice, Liam and Chloe looked at each other during the ceremony and smiled. Their daughter had chosen a partner who saw her as an equal, who respected her career and ambitions, who wanted to build a life side by side with her, not command or overprotect her. This is how it should have been. From the beginning, Chloe whispered to Liam as they watched the young couple's vows. Liam squeezed her hand. Maybe we needed to learn the hard way to teach her the right way. Years later, when Liam was diagnosed with a serious heart condition, a result of the extreme stress he had suffered during those 3 years of mourning, Chloe cared for him with the same dedication he had always shown her. But not as a nurse caring for a patient, but as a partner, ensuring the other had what they needed to recover. During his recovery, lying in the hospital bed, Liam held Chloe's hand and said, "You know what I realized? Back then, when you were dead, I wanted to die too because I thought I couldn't live without you. But the truth is, I didn't want to live without you because I didn't know who I was without you. Now I know. I know exactly who I am, with or without you by my side, and that's exactly why I want you by my side. Not because I need you, but because I choose you." Chloe kissed his hand softly. "And I choose you every day, not because you complete me, but because together we are better than we are apart." When Liam fully recovered, they took a trip they had postponed for decades. They went back to the Bronx, to the neighborhood where it all began. They walked the same streets where Liam had worked as a bricklayer and Chloe had sold candy. They visited the school where they met, now renovated, but still running. They sat on the same park bench where they had first talked, 2 poor teenagers dreaming of an impossible future. Now they were 2 elderly people who had lived more lives than they could have imagined, who had fallen and risen, who had been lost and found each other again. "Can you believe we made it here?" Liam asked, looking around the neighborhood that remained poor despite all the decades that had passed. Chloe laced her fingers through his. "We didn't just make it, we survived. And we transformed all that pain into something that helped other people survive too. They created a scholarship for young people from the Bronx who wanted to pursue careers in law, business, or social work. They wanted to give other young people the opportunities they didn't have. They wanted someone to benefit from everything they had learned through so much suffering. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by Hope, their son-in-law, 3 grandchildren, and a crowd of people whose lives they had touched over the years, Liam and Chloe renewed their vows once more. Not because they needed to, but because they wanted to publicly celebrate the love that had withstood everything life had thrown at it. This time, the vows were simple. Liam just said, "I love you more today than yesterday, and less than I will love you tomorrow." And Chloe replied, "You are my choice, today and always." When Liam passed away at 78, it was peacefully, holding Chloe's hand, surrounded by his family. His last words were, "It was worth it. Every tear, every moment of pain, every second of separation. It was all worth it because it brought me back to you." Chloe mourned his death, but not with the destructive despair he had mourned hers years ago. She cried with the natural sadness of someone who loses a beloved partner, but also with gratitude for having had so many years together after almost losing everything. She continued her work at the NGO, continued helping women, continued being strong. But every afternoon, religiously, she visited the grave where Liam now truly rested. She brought red roses and talked to him, telling him about her day, about the grandchildren, about the women the organization had helped. And sometimes, when the wind blew a certain way through the cypresses, Chloe swore she could feel his presence by her side, not as a haunting ghost, but as a loving presence reminding her of everything they had built together, of the long road they had traveled from those two poor teenagers at a school gate to becoming people who made a difference in the world. Their story became a legend in the neighborhood where they grew up, told as an example of true love, of second chances, of redemption. Young couples visited Chloe asking for advice, and she always said the same thing: true love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing to stay together, even after seeing all the imperfections. It's about turning scars into wisdom and pain into strength. It's about dying 1,000 times and being reborn 1,001, always choosing each other. When Chloe finally joined Liam many years later, she was buried beside him under a headstone that simply read, "Together again, this time for good." And below, a quote she had asked to be engraved: "True love outlives death itself." The NGO she had created continued to operate, now managed by Hope and a dedicated team. Liam's company still helped small entrepreneurs, and their grandchildren, growing up hearing the extraordinary story of their grandparents, learned that even from the deepest darkness, light can emerge. That even from the most devastating suffering, something beautiful can be born. That true love is not what never faces storms, but what survives them and emerges stronger. The red roses Liam had brought for 3 years to an empty tomb, crying tears of blood for a woman he believed dead, became a symbol of Chloe's organization. Every woman who found the strength to leave a situation of violence received a red rose, a reminder that even from death can come rebirth, that even from tears can come strength, that even from an end can come a new beginning. And so the story of Liam and Chloe transcended their own lives, becoming an inspiration for countless others facing their own private hells. It proved that true love is not a fairy tale, not perfection, not the absence of pain. It is a conscious choice, a constant struggle, a rising together each time they fall. It is turning tears of blood into red roses, death into life, despair into hope. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.